introduction, and then we can go on.
Awesome.
All right, welcome to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect, everyone. My name is Jared Mello. Today, I have the author of the book, If Only I'd Known. Her name is Chelsey Cole. She is a psychotherapist, an LPC, licensed professional counselor, and she's got a very good story because she has insight into multiple types of narcissistic people. She's been in relationships with them herself, and she's come out the other side. And she's a therapist. She was a therapist while you were in these relationships too, right? That's an
Yes.
interesting point to note too.
Yes.
So it goes to show you, the attachment styles people have. It doesn't matter what your profession is. You can be a professional, and it can still suck you in. So how are you today, Chelsey?
Yeah, I'm doing good. How are you?
Rocking and rolling. So your two relationships, I guess you had
Mhm.
more of a grandiose one you were with, and then more of a covert one.
Vulnerable. Yep.
Yeah. And I guess you could talk about what they were like and how you discovered what they were all about and how you finally got out, most
Mm.
importantly, because that's the hardest part for people.
Yes. Getting out is definitely the hardest thing you'll ever do. So my story really starts more from childhood. I grew up where the cycle of abuse was kind of normalized, where there was this promises were made, promises were broken. There's the tension building, then things got a little bit better, then something would happen again. So I have a very empathic mom who I was very close to and still am. And then my dad was more of a neglectful narcissist, which we can talk about. So there's just emotional coldness and distance there. So by the time I got to adult relationships, I was very used to feeling like I needed to earn love, that I needed to keep trying and keep going. And me being me, I'm just a very person who's into personal development. Obviously, I am a therapist. I was always interested in understanding why people do what they do. And I knew theoretically that like good relationships exist and good people exist, but I didn't necessarily feel that I could go for those people. I felt like, well, I'm kind of defective and damaged, so I'll find somebody else. Like the best I can do is find somebody else who is, and then we'll kind of heal together and then we'll have a good relationship. Like that was literally, I think if you come from that kind of environment, you think that that's how it has to go. So that kind of set me up to be in my first relationship with a grandiose narcissist and then ultimately a vulnerable narcissist as well. And there's so many layers we could get into
A
there.
lot of things to talk about there. So I
Yeah.
think what happens to people, if they had a grandiose narcissist first, they want to find someone that's exactly the opposite of that person. So they say,
Exactly.
not
Yes.
like the grandiose guy. I want this person that's going to be a little more maybe reserved, like
Hmm.
a vulnerable narcissist would be, because you
Yeah.
would think this person's nothing like my ex, so they must be better. But it turns out it's just a different version of the same thing.
It's no, that's totally true. Once, so yeah, I was with the grandiose narcissist, and then I did think I don't want anything like them. So the next guy I went out with, I described as so nice, like almost too nice. You know, the people who you're like, why are
Yeah,
you so nice?
right.
But he was so nice and so different. Like I thought we shared the same values. I thought his family shared the same values. He came from a similar background as I did as far as religion goes, at least I thought. So I thought we were building, I thought we were starting on a much better ground. We were honest with each other relatively quickly, like started spending a lot of time together. So I thought we were really building something good. He was very different, not super arrogant or grandiose, actually seemed more humble and like talked about how he wanted to make things better and how people didn't get him in past relationships, and he was so appreciative of me and how I got him and supported him. That should have been a sign to me, because he was basically saying like these people saw through me eventually, and then they didn't want to support me, but you're such a good support. And I was like, okay, well, I guess like I want to be a good support, so I guess that's good. And so I thought we were just going to overcome things together and make things better. And then over time discover that he was just as narcissistic as the grandiose narcissist, just as entitled. His entitlement just looked different. It was more like, why doesn't the world see how great I am? Why is everyone always out to get me? Why doesn't anything go my way? So it had that more kind of vulnerable, sad, depressed feel to it. And
Victim
so I
like.
didn't catch it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so like
Victimized.
the victim slash entitlement, where if only this one thing would go differently,
Yeah.
everything would be better for me. Or if I only had this loan for my business to start, if I only
Mm-hmm.
had a family to back me financially or someone to back me
Yep.
financially, everything would be different. And it's important to see that version too, because everyone can see, like most people can tell the grandiose version, like they're bombastic and they're loud and you
Mhm.
see that coming. But the covert ones, sometimes people don't see that one coming for years. And especially if
Right.
they had a covert parent, like you don't even know sometimes until people are in their 30s. Oh, okay. My
Yeah.
parent was like this, and I had a romantic relationship was like this, probably because I had a parent that was like that.
Mhm. Yeah, because vulnerable narcissists or covert narcissists are often called have one of two presentations. Either they're very depressed and down on their luck, and therapists will even think that they're genuinely depressed and will treat them for depression. But no matter how much you give and how much you try, their depression doesn't get better. Or they seem really nice, like the nicest person that you've ever met, and they try hard to let everybody think that they're this, you know, really nice and giving or generous person, and so you feel lucky to be with them
You know that,
initially.
and that's what they want you to think too, right? They want you to think that you're lucky to be with them. And the other
Yeah.
interesting thing to note with that guy was he said, people saw through me, which is an interesting thing to say to somebody. They saw through me. And he said, "Oh, I'm so glad you are supportive of me, though." So
Yeah.
they're doing like the mixed message, sometimes a backhanded compliment thing too. Like you
Yeah.
have said before, they're great at saying something that will appear loving, but in
Hmm.
reality, it's more controlling and devaluing.
Hmm.
And like
Hmm.
the example you use in the book would be something like, "You'll never find someone to love me or love you as much as I love you." And so
Yeah.
when they say something like that, it accomplishes a couple things. It's a controlling thing. Stay here because no one's going to love you like the way I love you. But it's also devaluing too, and saying, yeah, you're not going to find someone else. There's no one out here for you besides me.
Yeah.
So they accomplish a couple things when they say something like
Yeah.
that.
They're really great at crafting those manipulative kind of things where you even feel guilty for pushing against that. Like they just said, no one's going to love you as much as I do. So now if I say, well, I don't like how that makes me feel, then they're going to turn that around and say, I just said I loved you more than anyone. And here you are making this about you. Like, where
Yeah.
do you even go with that? And for him, he didn't expressly say they saw through me, but he said it in so many words, like they didn't support me with this, and then they wanted me to do this, and they started putting these expectations on me, and it kind of gave examples that I didn't have enough background or history to know whether they were legitimate or not. And that's the other thing. Sometimes we just don't know what we don't know, and so you do want to take time because narcissism presents itself as patterns of behavior over time. So I didn't know his ex-girlfriend. I didn't know everything that he'd been through, whether it was legitimate or not. But then he followed it up with, that's why I'm so glad, you're supportive of me and we're making these goals. And I know things can get better. I've just never had anyone understand me or help me in this way. Well, I'm a therapist and I'm naturally just giving and helpful. So I'm like, well, I have no problem helping and giving if you also, want to improve yourself. And so I just kind of thought we were on this trajectory together, building a life together and creating goals. I didn't know that I was just being used for what I could give.
Absolutely. And you were probably a great source of supply too, as a
Uh-huh.
therapist. Like you were someone that was going to be willing to help them, talk it out with them, and they probably loved that.
They literally did say that they prayed for a therapist.
Ah, their prayers, and who said prayer doesn't work?
And that, is like one of those weird undertones of like, no one's ever going to love you as much as I do. It's like, I prayed for you. I prayed specifically for you, for a therapist, because I knew that if I had someone to help me and understand me, like I could grow into this great person. And so it was also one of those things that I was like, well, I can't really be your therapist. Like there's a boundary blur there. Like
Sure, sure.
you really shouldn't be your partner's therapist, even if you are a therapist. But at the same time, it was supposed to be a compliment. So I was like, oh, well, I guess that's good. Like I didn't know what I didn't know. So
Right,
I know a lot more about narcissism now.
right. And he was guilt tripping you a little bit with that too there. Well, yeah, I prayed for you, so you better stick around for me.
Yeah.
Who
It's
was
like,
you to
what am I
be?
going to what am
Right?
I going to do now and say, nope, wrong. No, that was the wrong prayer.
Exactly. So the other thing I like that you said in your book was the narcissistic person, they will get you confusing tolerating abuse with loyalty.
Mm.
and
Mm.
second chances with love,
Yeah.
where they'll get you thinking this is what you should be doing. You should be
Mhm.
tolerating all of my mistreatment because that's just being loyal. And yeah,
Mhm.
I messed up here and here and here. Not that they'll ever admit to messing up, but you'll
Mhm.
think in your head, I need to give them a second chance because that's what good people do. So perhaps you could
Yes.
talk about those two concepts there.
Yeah, I do break down in my book how narcissistic abuse and relationships often send us into this existential crisis of like, what does it mean to be a good person? What does it take to make a relationship work? Who am I even anymore? Because I thought I was a good person, but then I've been told for so long that I'm not giving enough and not caring, and I'm mean if I, set expectations, especially survivors who do tend to be agreeable. Like most survivors are kind, empathetic, caring. They also try to make sense of the narcissist behaviors based on who they are. So they'll assume the narcissist is a nice, caring person like they are, and
Right.
then give second chances based on that. Well, everybody messes up. If I did that, I would want grace. And the difference is, though, if you did that, you would take responsibility and improve and want to make things better and be so grateful that this person gave you a second chance. Narcissist feels entitled to a second
Mm.
chance and unlimited second chances. Like there is no limit to it. As soon as you set a firm boundary and say, no, no more, like we can't continue this way, or you set a firm expectation like you should be able to do in healthy relationships, that's when the narcissist says, this isn't working. What happened? You changed. Why are you treating me this way? I thought you call yourself a good person, or you call yourself a Christian, a religious
Ah,
person, and you're treating me like this. And that's, all the guilt tripping goes in. So you will definitely see that a narcissist will exploit your good characteristics and either use them against you or say that you're being mean, rude, selfish, everything you try not to be as soon as you set a boundary.
right. Weaponizing your religion or your faith against you too. That is very insidious.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely had that happen because it's the vulnerable narcissist I was with. We were, both Christians, and well, he says that he is, and they use those values and make you think that you're going against your own religion if you do these things. But the thing is, they put themselves between you and God. They
Right.
want to be God. They say, I'm interpreting this verse or this scripture, and here's what it means, and here's what you're doing. They take
Right.
away your voice or your beliefs, and they input their narrative into it.
Right. And I mean, a lot of times they're experts at getting people to jade to them, justify, argue, defend, and explain,
Yeah.
because people want the narcissistic person to agree with them and to validate their reality. But that's the one thing they'll never do. They never validate someone's reality and they never agree, especially in some sort of argument or disagreement. And so it always comes down to they make you guilty.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
make you something wrong with you. And it makes the other person, they want that validation so bad, if only they will
Mm-hmm.
agree. But they're playing the wrong game at this point. They're jumping through the narcissistic person's hoops, and
Mm-hmm.
the goalposts will just keep on moving and keep on moving. I mean, which is why I always say they got to just stop playing the game, because when
Yeah.
you notice yourself doing that, there is no winning that game. The narcissist will
No.
never give their approval, but they position themselves in a way, like you said, like they're God, and they have the power to give validation or take it away.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
but just and there is and once you're in the game, there's just nothing to do. There's nothing to do because it's not going to go well. But unsubscribing is what I like to call
Oh, I like
unsubscribing
that.
from the narcissistic person's reality. Now, the
Yeah.
other thing you were saying though too, the trauma bond, right? The trauma
Yeah.
bond is basically why people wind up in these situations. But
Mm-hmm.
what's your definition of a trauma bond?
A trauma bond happens when you form an attachment to someone who also hurts you. And from an attachment perspective, we're born with a need to attach. It is as essential as breathing, eating. It kind of subconsciously answers that question, who will
Sure.
take care of me? You don't think about, oh, should I attach to my parent or caregiver? Are they healthy or unhealthy? Or what's this going to do to me if I attach to this person? You just do. You just attach. And so
Right.
when you grow up in adult relationships and you've had narcissistic or dysfunctional or neglectful, relationships or family home life growing up, then love became synonymous with chaos,
Hmm.
or love becomes synonymous with constantly trying to earn someone's love. Like, oh, this is just how relationships are. This is what it's like. And that is a perfect setup for a narcissistic relationship, because narcissists are always going to create hot and cold days. It's part of the narcissistic cycle of abuse, which is another anchor into the trauma bond, is that there's always going to be hot and cold days. So if you're thinking that I just have to get through this bad time or this stressful time, and eventually it's just going to be good days, that's like thinking it's going to stay sunny on a day that it's sunny and it's never going to rain again.
Mm.
That's not how it works. We don't throw away all our umbrellas on a sunny day because we're like, sun, finally, we're good.
Right.
And that's the kind of radical acceptance, honestly, you have to have in a narcissistic relationship. We're having a good day. Great. I'm glad we're having a good day. Does that mean there's no more bad days and they're not going to criticize me anymore and they're not going to gaslight me? No, that will definitely happen. You can appreciate the good day, but, know that the bad days are going to come again too.
Absolutely. And what are your recommendations for people on how to break the trauma bond? Because it is just like a drug addiction for a lot of people. And when they try to rip off the Band-Aid, they will experience withdrawal symptoms just as if it was a drug. So what are your suggestions for someone in that situation?
Yeah. And the way I kind of organized and broke down my book, I kind of talk about 7 different phases and what all that you have to go through to heal. And it does often feel like an addiction, even though it's really about attachment and the narcissistic cycle of abuse and intermittent reinforcement. And intermittent reinforcement says that rewards given at randomly dispersed times are release more dopamine in the brain. So whenever you get a reward that's unexpected, like you've had bad day, criticism, they're yelling at you, they're giving you the silent treatment, and then all of a sudden they compliment you. They just notice you. They walk into the room and say, "Oh, that looks nice." It's like the sun is shining, the dopamine is up, and you're like, "This is all I ever wanted." And I can, now all of a sudden all the bad days are forgotten and you're like, oh, "Good, we're in a good place." And so even just knowing that that's what's going on. It's not love. It doesn't mean everything is better now. It means you got a hit of dopamine because they finally gave you a breadcrumb. I know you've used the example of like gambling. That's a perfect example. That's why gambling is so addictive. If you went to the slot machine and you got something every time you pulled the lever, there would be no gambling addiction. Like, it is because you don't know when the next reward is going to come that you stay for so long. Right. And so part of breaking that trauma bond is just recognizing what's happening, because your emotions, your attachment system says, do whatever you have to do to keep this person, to keep this attachment. But logically, your mind may know this isn't good. This is abusive. Like, I'm miserable. I have to end this. And so you're going to feel like you're at war for a bit, because you have to give yourself time to break away from that, to start to heal. I will often recommend, if even thinking about the relationship sends you into a panic and you just have extreme fears of abandonment or being alone and you just can't even imagine it, then don't think about that. Decide not to decide for now, but do at least start investing in things that are good for you. Start talking to friends more that you've cut off because you've been confused or overwhelmed by this relationship. Start investing in hobbies or interests that are important to you. Start setting goals outside of the relationship. Like, if you want to go back to school or you want to focus on something in your career, at least do things that build you up outside of the relationship, kind of put more legs on the table so that you will feel more solid. And then a month from now, 6 months from now, go back and revisit that question of, is this relationship good for me?
That makes sense. Because I think also, if people don't heal the parts of them that were attracted, or I guess the attachment style too, for that matter, right? Between the attraction and the attachment, if they don't heal that, even if the relationship ends, they're probably just going to find a similar person. There's a different face, but a similar disorder. And that's why it's important to, I think, like you said, have a little alone time, cultivate your own life and your friends and your hobbies and your interests, the things that you lost in the narcissistic relationship, cultivate them again once someone's single. And then you can speak to this too real quick. A lot of women, when they're talking to me about the issues with narcissistic relationships, etc., there's some of them that say to me, they just don't feel it with people that don't have a little bit of that dark triad. they know on paper they should like this person, but they just don't. And a lot of these women are very successful. They're doing
Mm-hmm.
really well financially. They're in great shape, etc. They live on their own, lots of money in the
Mm-hmm.
bank, but they find themselves going after these people that are quote unquote way below them in all of those measurable boxes, and they don't
Right.
understand what's wrong with me. Why am I so into this person that I shouldn't be
Mm.
into? My parents would be so disappointed in me that I'm caught up on this guy here. And to me, there's like two different things going on there, right? The one is they don't feel it for the good one. And then they're
Mm-hmm.
also caught in that cycle of the trauma bond cycle. Often there might have been like an issue with one of the parents, but perhaps you
Mm-hmm.
could speak about that part real quick.
Yeah. Men or women who find themselves
Sure.
attracted to like the borderline or narcissistic kind of partner, what I see so often from them is that they can be really successful in other relationships like friendships or work, but they are success oriented, like always looking for the next thing, always looking for the next goal, the next achievement. And they only feel good when they're achieving, when they're in
Mm,
motion. So they're really good. Like that's a great skill for career, like to keep going and to keep pushing. But to feel like you have to do that in your relationship too, like you have to earn someone's love or care or respect, like then that is going to be a disadvantage. And that's going to push you right into a narcissistic relationship, because if there's one thing that a narcissistic relationship makes you feel, it's not enough.
mhm,
And if you're very, I know for me, I'll speak for myself, like if you feel that you always have to keep earning and keep doing and keep trying and keep pushing, and your self-worth is on the other side of whatever the next goal is, then you will stay in a narcissistic relationship for months, years, decades, because they will always be moving the carrot. And so, what I would recommend to those people, if you're listening and you resonate with that, is to ask yourself about that. What's the root of your self worth? Is it beyond the next achievement? Is it beyond the next goal? Where did that come from? And that's partly what I talk people through in coaching and therapy in my book as well. Those questions of like, how did you feel growing up, and where does your self-worth come from? And if it's always on this next thing, this next external achievement, then you're going to keep being attracted to narcissists.
right. I think there's just a part of it also where they won't appreciate something that doesn't like torture them a little bit. Like they like that
It doesn't
struggle,
feel familiar. Yeah.
right? The up and down, the emotional roller coaster. It's
Mm-hmm.
like the expression, if home wasn't a safe place for you growing up, you got to be really careful with people who feel like home in adulthood. Similar
Yeah.
dynamic, like that speaks to that. Yeah, there was some chaos in your upbringing and you feel comfortable in chaos
Mm-hmm.
in adulthood. Doesn't mean
Mm-hmm.
it's healthy, doesn't even
Right.
mean it's safe, but it's what you feel comfortable in. And
Mm-hmm.
learning to break out of that is humongous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that quote, and I often tell people healthy doesn't always mean or familiar doesn't always mean healthy.
Right. And I think that's
It's,
what they also say, character over chemistry too, I think that's
oh
another good
yes,
one.
yes, 100%. Yeah, because we have this totally messed up idea too about what chemistry is. Like in the movies, Disney, fairy tales, it's like everyone has a chance if you just give them enough love, time, and attention. Everyone can be saved, and there'll be uh, the movies where someone they don't want to be with you, and then at the end they're you finally broke them down because you're always around, and so yeah, they'll finally be with you. Or the guy or the girl who can never be faithful, but you're going to be the exception, and you're going to make them stay faithful even though they haven't been before. Like we romanticize this idea of the chase,
Right.
and narcissists are great at the chase and always giving you something to chase. So you have to retrain your nervous system to know that safety is in what's calm. And initially that will feel boring because there's not as much dopamine. Your dopamine levels are kind of out of whack if you've been in these narcissistic relationships. You're used to the big highs and the big lows. And so now like this, even keel, like things are going good and we really don't we really don't have big blowouts or big arguments and we can just talk things through. Like that's going to feel kind of boring. But you get to decide what label you want to put on that. Does it feel boring or does it feel calm, which is unfamiliar? And I think even the language around that can change how you feel about that person.
I agree with that. I think looking at it in that way can make a huge difference for a lot of people, and knowing
Mhm.
that that ultimately can be fulfilling as well. Like people think they
Mhm.
get caught up in those attachments, but it doesn't always mean that's going to be fulfilling. It's not going to
Mm-mm.
fulfill them. It might feel like they're accomplishing something just because they have to work so hard for the scraps of affection and love.
Right.
But that doesn't mean like you're actually being fulfilled and reaching your potential. If anything, it's taking from them. It's taking
Mhm.
from what they can accomplish in life because they're working so hard for things that shouldn't be so hard to work for.
Mhm. Mhm. And that goes right into the piece I was just talking about of if you are achievement driven, then you're going to feel like you're achieving something every time you have, I always thought we're one insight away from making this whole thing work. So I just have to find the right
Mm,
book, the right communication strategy, the right insight that's going to make everything come together. And he's going to go, oh, this is why I've been acting this way. And this is why our relationship hasn't been working. And now that we have this missing piece and now we communicate this way or have talked about this attachment style, like now everything fits and we're good. And so you're constantly looking for that next thing. There's no limit on the amount of information out there about
mm,
relationships and love languages and attachment styles. All of those are fine in the appropriate context, but to try
right.
to bring those as the reason a narcissistic relationship isn't working it's going to do
And
more
that's
damage than
something to
good.
be very important to know too, is that when you have that kind of rationalization, I guess I'll call it, where you say, if
Mhm.
we are just one insight away, we are on one insight or one book or one concept away from making this work. If
Yep.
someone starts thinking like that, that is something to pay attention to, because chances
Yes.
are, and I always say to people this too, if you have to hope that they become like who they used to be, or hope that they need to be someone different, and you're not into who they are right now,
Mm.
that's probably an issue. And you
Mm.
really got to really examine, okay, would I be
Mhm.
okay if they didn't change?
Yeah.
And if that's not the case, if you wouldn't be okay if they didn't change, not a good thing.
No.
Not a good thing at all.
That's so funny you asked that because I'll ask my clients the same thing sometimes. I'll be like, let's assume nothing changes. Would you want this? And they pretty quickly say no. But then it's followed up with, but
Ah!
hope. But there's hope. But we haven't tried this. But there's this new therapy. But there's this other book that I haven't read yet. And it's kind of like there's this concept called the shelf, like your psychological shelf. You put things on the shelf that don't make sense, like all the betrayals, the inconsistencies, the
Mm,
lies, the criticisms. When you're not ready to end the relationship, you just put things on the shelf. Eventually the shelf breaks. But how long, how many years, how many decades do you want to give to adding to your shelf something that you knew maybe the first date?
mm. I never heard that concept before. I really like that. The
It's
psychological shelf.
It's so helpful. And related to this is something called betrayal blindness. And it says the more you want to keep an attachment, the more you're able or willing to overlook things that would threaten the attachment.
Say that again. That's a good one.
The more you want to keep the attachment, the more you're able or willing to overlook things that would threaten the attachment.
That's a good one. That's a good one. And I think also knowing that you can't help anyone that doesn't want to help themselves, and knowing that if they don't want to change and they aren't willing to change, or they don't even think there's a problem, so why would they want to change if they
Exactly.
don't think there's a problem? Just knowing that is humongous. And a lot of
Hmm.
people think they want to do the work for their partner, and they want to lead them into growth and lead them into this, but it's just not how
Yeah.
it works. Like they have to want to do that on their own.
That's part of, yeah, the problem, part of the blocks that keep people stuck is part of them knows that if they don't do the work, it won't be done.
Right.
And I think that's part of what keeps people stuck is because most survivors are more than willing to do the work, more than willing to take responsibility. And you know that if you really step back from that and honestly require your partner, or the narcissist could be your mother or your brother, or your sister, whoever, like if you step back and honestly allow that person to come forward and take the responsibility that's theirs, you know that they won't. And
And
so,
if you know that, that's a big red
yeah,
flag there too, that
right.
you're going to be the one pulling more than your fair share indefinitely.
Yes, it will
Indefinitely.
always be imbalanced.
Absolutely. So I do want to be cognizant of your time here. I know I've already kept you a few minutes past,
It's
but
okay.
is there anything else that you wanted to share and that you thought was important?
I always just want people to know whenever I'm talking, like if you resonate with this, to know that you're not crazy and you're not alone, and there is hope. There is a chance for things to be better and to be different. Even if the narcissist doesn't change, as we know that they don't, you can. The way you relate to them can. You can learn how to communicate with them. You can learn how to disengage. The resources are here. I know you have a lot. I know I have a lot. So whatever resonates with people, just find that group, find that person that resonates, that makes you feel sane and safe, and know that you can heal.
That's a good note to end it on there, that there is hope. There is hope for people to get out of those kinds of relationships, to break a trauma bond, and then maybe even more importantly, find a healthy partner afterwards, not just keep on repeating the same cycle, but find someone that's good for you, like you have now, that would be a fulfilling relationship.
Yes. That's the best thing. Yeah. If you can get out of that toxic relationship and have a healthy relationship, it heals you in more ways than you could even imagine. So knowing even that that's a possibility too can give you hope, but in a good way.
Because I know you do. You have like a little glow about you that I do see from women that gotten out of these kinds of relationships and then they find someone better. Like you can see it because the smile touches their eyes and they kind of have this inner glow in them, which is cool to see.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I definitely feel that way. I say it's like you, a healthy partner can stitch the broken pieces of you back together. And I definitely feel that way. So I want that for everybody.
All right, Chelsey. Thanks for your time here. I know hopefully we can talk again at some point where you have longer to speak. But because I think we have a lot more we could possibly talk about.
For sure. We can get into a lot. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome, Chelsey. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye.